when he accidentally turns all the power off, does he kill a load of people on life support? Welcome back. Where the hell have I been? Yes, I know it has been a while. The main reason for that is just the boring one of haven't really had much time to do this. Like, I am self-employed, so obviously work comes first. If you are self-employed, then that can sometimes be quite all-consuming. And on top of that, my podcast came back. I do a podcast called Mystery on the Rocks with Suze Kebner and Masood Milas, where we look at unsolved mysteries and unexplained phenomena, as well as drinking cocktails. Emphasis is on the silly. We don't do deep dive investigative stuff. It's really just a silly little podcast with three mates just talking nonsense. If that is your sort of thing, do go and check it out. We really love doing it. A big factor, and this might be quite weird to hear from a Doctor Who fan, but as sort of time moved away from the end of the last series, my enthusiasm properly waned when it came to Doctor Who. Now, I mentioned in my videos looking at The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death that I did not care for those episodes. As time has moved on, it's not a case of me having warmed to them. In fact, if anything, I actually think they're a lot worse than I did when I first watched them. What that did was, because they weren't just episodes of the show, like as a Doctor Who fan, you know, sometimes a story will come along, it isn't particularly good, you take the hit and you move on. But Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death weren't just, I didn't just think that they were bad, and I did, I thought they were dreadful. It wasn't just that. It was the fact that because they were like a finale, a huge checkpoint in the story of Ruby Sunday and the ongoing mystery of, like, you know, sort of Susan Triad and Mrs. Flood. And because the way they approached those things, and I know we haven't got all the answers yet, I'm not saying that that story was over, but the fact is that it was a huge insight into how these things were being approached. I thought it was lacking, and that meant I had very little faith in it going forward. And then you'll notice I didn't do a video for Joy to the World, and I think that ship has sailed. I'm not going to do like an immediate reaction to Joy to the World like 4 months later. Suffice it to say, I thought it was fine. Like, I know that it got a lot of love in how charming it was, but I honestly didn't find it charming enough to paper over the cracks in what I thought was a fairly weak story. It was very disjointed. Joy to the World felt like two cars welded together. So what it didn't do was take the taste away from Empire of Death. So I've had that sort of like hanging over me. And then as we've approached season 2, I've had no excitement for it whatsoever, which has been a weird feeling. It's the first time that's ever happened to me as a Doctor Who fan. So because my enthusiasm waned on Doctor Who, basically Empire of Death almost broke Doctor Who entirely for me, which meant obviously the marathon sort of like slowed down. Now, I got to Pyramids of Mars. I will pick it back up again, of course I will, as well as doing immediate reactions to episodes this season. I got to Pyramids of Mars. I've watched a bit further ahead, so I've actually watched up to and including Robots of Death. So the marathon will pick up again. But honestly, Empire of Death really did sort of like put me off Doctor Who for quite a bit. But this video isn't about that. It's not about Empire of Death. It's not about Joy to the World. It's about the robot revolution. So did the robot revolution help to take the taste away from Empire of Death? Did it do what Joy to the World couldn't and buoy me up and give me a bit more excitement for the rest of this season? It did not. I'm not saying that the robot revolution was appalling, because there were some elements in it I liked, and I will get to those. And obviously, I don't know if you're new to this channel, and even if you're not, if you can remember back from when it was active, like, I do try and tend to stay positive. I don't like being negative about Doctor Who. The robot revolution was, obviously, it was a season opener, and it was introducing Belinda Chandra. Now, season openers, especially the Russell T Davies ones, had a reputation for being sort of like frothy and light. But that does not mean they weren't, or like sometimes they have the potential and the capacity to be strong stories in their own right. And if anything, they should be, even as season openers. Partners in Crime isn't entirely to my taste, but it does its job very well. Smith & Jones, I think, is still probably, it's the best season opener written by Russell T Davies. I think the best season opener happens to be The 11th Hour, in just of all of the stuff it had to set up and establish and made it look effortless. So season openers can be strong stories in their own right. So going in expecting one or wanting one from a season opener, that is not a bad thing. We should be getting good, solid stories. Now, if you think the Robot Revolution was a strong, solid story, more power to you. I wish that I had that same reaction. I just found it very, very lacking. Russell T Davies has got it in him to write a Smith & Jones. And I know that because he wrote Smith & Jones. And the reason I'll refer to Smith & Jones a lot is because I wonder, because you could always say, oh, well, maybe he meant to do that. And obviously it's very deliberate. But with, he kicked off this new era, obviously with the 60th anniversary specials. But the first season proper, once he'd got rid of once he'd moved on from bringing Tennant and Tate back and the 60th anniversary and settling into this new Doctor's era, the 15th Doctor's era, the first companion was a, 19, 20-year-old blonde. Ruby Sunday, I loved Ruby Sunday. Preferred her to Rose. But the similarities between Ruby and Rose and Belinda and Martha to the fact that they work in a hospital, that doesn't feel like it's deliberate. That feels a little bit like he's unconsciously recycling. Robot Revolution ultimately goes places that Smith & Jones didn't, and they do become very different stories. But Smith & Jones was linear. Smith & Jones it set Martha up, and it did set Martha up like incredibly well. Like we meet her family very quickly because she's on the phone to them in quick succession. We have an idea of who Martha is before the hospital goes to the moon. Robot Revolution is much choppier. So we flashback meet her as a 15-year-old with her boyfriend, and then we see her in her day job in her house share, and all of that's really good. All of that's really good character stuff, and we do get an idea of, in the same way that we get an idea of who Martha was when we hit the moon in Smith & Jones, we have a good idea of who Belinda is when she lands on Miss Belinda Chandra. This isn't necessarily a ding at the characterization of Belinda. I'm more sort of like getting to what I didn't find appealing about the structure of the episode itself, the Robot Revolution, because Smith & Jones, being linear, sort of like start to finish, notwithstanding the Doctor's little coming back from the end of the episode to that, we have a linear progression. Because Robot Revolution doesn't do that, that doesn't lend itself very well to an opening episode where things are being sort of like set up and chess pieces are being put in place. One chess piece being Belinda. So I don't mind flashing forward to the present day. What doesn't work for me is the Doctor's presence in it. So he's chasing her through the hospital, and when he accidentally turns all the power off, does he kill a load of people on life support? The implications of that are a bit... Either way, even if I'm wrong, it made me go, wait a minute. Chasing her into the garden seemed to only exist so that Mrs. Flood saw him, and then when Mrs. Flood looks at the camera and goes, "You ain't seen me," that just instantly, and this is a me thing, because I have no faith in how that's going to pan out, based on how Empire of Death resolved some of its questions. I just sort of went, oh God, and that was an eye roll immediately. For me, the perfect moment to introduce the Doctor for the first time is when Belinda's on the throne and they call for the historian to come forward. And it's almost shot like this, that the big reveal is that the historian is the Doctor. That feels to me like that's the first time we should have seen the Doctor, and then he could have explained what he was doing there and have been there for 6 months later on, as he does anyway. He tells Belinda anyway. That would be when we see the fact that he has been there for longer than us following her would suggest. Having seen him at the beginning running through the hospital in her garden kind of lessens that impact. And I get that people are like, oh, it's the first episode and we should see the Doctor from the beginning. Okay, if that's what they decided to do, they were like, oh, it's a little bit late for the Doctor to show up for the first time there, let's do it this way. then a little bit more retooling was required, I think, for it to actually have not felt all cut up and as disjointed as it was. Yes, but there was a time fracture. It was meant to feel disjointed. Okay, that should not have been what they were going for then, not in the first episode. Just because something's deliberate doesn't mean I think it was a good idea. And having it be so disjointed does not make for a good easing into a new season, in my opinion. And this has a lot to sort of like get through. And none of it really, and it's to the detriment of certain things that it wants you to think are important. So Sasha 55, when we first meet Sasha 55, she is stood there waiting for Belinda to come off the ship. Belinda walks along, and Sasha, very terrified for her life, says to Belinda, "Help us," or "Save us," or something like that. Now she does that obviously to make the audience aware and Belinda aware that something is not right. Something is not right, and that would be okay if 10 minutes later we didn't discover the fact that she's already Sasha 55 is already into a revolution. She already knows the Doctor. She trusts the Doctor to be able to save them, and even has a bit of swagger about it. That does not correlate with when Belinda comes off the ship and she goes, "Save us." It doesn't feel like the same character. Then when Sasha dies, it doesn't really have the impact that the episode wants it to have, at least not for me. We barely know her, and there's also been that inconsistency where, well, hang on a minute, why was she like that, and now that she's like that? It doesn't really add up. Where it does add up is later on, I think, because Sasha 55's death doesn't work for me in the moment that it happens, but it really, really works later on when Belinda references it. That's where it's sort of like, oh, so it has earned its place. But it doesn't really earn its place at the time, and it feels another thing that almost takes you out of the story a little bit. It took me out of the story. Manny, who is the other revolutionary, is like, his attitude towards Belinda feels like quite childish and immature. I know that they have this sort of like thing where she's like, "It's not my fault, it's not my fault." And like, she's dead right. We followed her from the beginning of the story. We know it's not her fault. And it doesn't make Manny feel like a rounded character with grievances. It makes him feel like just kind of like this artificially engineered glob of conflict that, again, just sort of like makes me go. And I'm finding it really hard watching the Robot Revolution to get back into Doctor Who like I want to after my, viscerally negative reactions to the finale of the previous season. And it's not like, again, to go back to Joy to the World, it's not like I thought Joy to the World was absolutely dreadful. Joy to the World just wasn't good enough to suck me back in. Same with Robot Revolution. Equally, I thought that the Alan twist was, first of all, it was fairly guessable, and even if it were guessable, that wouldn't necessarily be so bad if the twist itself weren't rubbish. And unfortunately, I think it was. It didn't really. First of all, the AI Al thing didn't. I was like, that's not as clever as you think it is. Second of all, not as funny as you think it is. And third of all, it kind of just, again, doesn't really work for me. I know that she says, "I'll go back and get him," so they have done that. I understand why they would, because they already think that she's their queen. Again, none of this really actually works for me. I really like the idea of a companion having a star named after them, bought for them, and then a misunderstanding that she's in charge of that star. But as a fun idea, yeah, no, I do like it. But in the episode itself, none of it is really actually laid out and explained well enough for me to buy it. So going back for Alan doesn't really work for me. It kind of works that a teenage boy with that sort of like ingrained sexism would react the way he does in the story, but it's left over for like a third act flashback, and like it's all blah 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 blah. It doesn't feel like it's seeded particularly well. There's a lot of like heavy-handed explanation for a lot of stuff as well, and maybe that's indicative of television as a whole these days. I don't know, But I do watch television these days. Doctor Who isn't the only thing I watch, and it just felt it felt even more pointed in this episode than it does elsewhere. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that idea that the robots they can't hear every ninth word, whether or not that's immediately apparent. What is apparent is the Doctor is stressing certain words, and it's very obvious what those words are. So the words that the Doctor wants Belinda and us to hear are emphasised enough that we pick up on them. And eventually it becomes the robots can't hear every ninth word. But then as soon as that happens, it's immediately sort of like done. There's the supercut of him saying it. I didn't feel like we needed that. Now, I didn't watch it with children. Somebody did say when I questioned it to them, they said, "Oh, well, of course, like, you know, I think maybe 9-year-olds would need that." And I'm like, okay, maybe they do, but like I said, even whether or not the pattern of every ninth word is something you pick up on, the fact that the words themselves are stressed to the degree that they are, it makes you go, oh, okay, that's what the Doctor is saying, or at least did to me. When they have the immediate recap, it kind of made me pause the episode in frustration, because I was like, whoa. One criticism of Doctor Who fans, and I mean not a criticism that Doctor Who fans have, it's a criticism of Doctor Who fans by other people, which is that Doctor Who is a kids show and you take it all too seriously. The fact that I'm doing a video on YouTube, you might think I'm one of those people. Doctor Who is I'd argue family show more than kids show, but obviously kids are in families, so it has to cater for them. What I don't think Doctor Who is, even though it is a kids show, it's not like The Very Hungry Caterpillar. It doesn't need to be a pop-up book. And I feel like in that moment it was. And again, a little bit later on. So when I said that Alan is a teenage boy that has this sort of like ingrained sexism, that is actually set up and seeded really nicely just with the line that girls aren't very good at maths. And I think he says something else patronising in that first scene as well. But later on, when he does the proposal and it's all about changing her clothes and all of that, that's where it becomes like sort of like spoon-fed to you. And I question whether that was necessary, because it's fairly obvious what his attitudes are from that first scene. And I've seen some people say that there's no need to lecture us about toxic masculinity. Well, if that, like, there's no need to write a story about anything. But if that's what Russell T Davies wants to address in this story, then fine, all power to him. Let him do it. So it's not like I'm saying, and toxic masculinity is a decent enough topic to bring up if you want. And this idea of like young men falling into that, then yeah, that's absolutely valid to tell a story about. And it's not heavy-handed commentary just by pointing out it exists. But I do think that that flashback scene felt a bit unnecessary in spelling it out. And I was actually, like I say, in that first scene, quite impressed, because I thought that is a good bit of characterization, just deftly hidden away. And then all of a sudden later on, it becomes like the 3D pop-up book version of it, which again made me recoil ever so slightly. So, did I like anything about this? Well, I did. So I enjoy Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, and I've actually found that he made his mark on the character like quite quickly, quicker than some, in fact. So when he shows up at the end of the giggle, I actually think he kind of like steals the show away from David Tennant very quickly. He goes, my show now, my character. And in this episode, I don't think that changes. I still think he's very competently and confidently the Doctor. Who this episode actually belongs to, though, is Varada Sethu as Belinda. Ruby Sunday, I thought, was probably the last season's biggest success. Good that she's coming back. So when and we knew that actually, even when she left at the end of Empire of Death. So it's good that we're going to see her again. So it's not really a case of an upgrade, because I think I think Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday was fantastic. I think Belinda Chandra, as played by Belinda Chandra, is at this moment in time as good, but maybe even shows a little bit more promise, just in the dynamic that she has with the Doctor. Yes, we've seen companions that have been involuntarily conscripted onto the TARDIS, like Ian and Barbara. Tegan felt like she always wanted to get home. We have seen that dynamic before, so I'm not saying that this is like something brand new, but because it doesn't happen all that often, it does happen quite rarely, it does feel fresh when it happens. I think it's a risk as well, because you don't want a companion who's your co-lead to not want to be there. So at this moment, and we haven't seen how it pans out in future episodes, but Belinda Chandra strikes the balance incredibly well. And Belinda Chandra's strength of character and how she calls the Doctor out and stuff and questions him with things is, it's refreshing, and it does feel like a change. That gives me hope for the season going forward. It is something I can latch onto, and Belinda's performance as Belinda is a really good handhold to go alongside Ncuti's Doctor, who I do like. It gives me reason to think that even if I might not enjoy how this season progresses with how it handles its revelations, like the end of this episode, the final shot with all the debris in space, made me go, "Ooh, that's intriguing." And then I instantly remembered how I'd been quite intrigued with some of the mysteries in the last season, and how Empire of Death handled those. Made me go, "Oh yeah, actually, this could all just turn out to be a load of bobbins." So even if that is the case, and even if this season does disappoint me like the last one did in terms of how it approaches its arc, I know that I'm going to enjoy Belinda Chandra and Ncuti Gatwa and later on the return of Millie Gibson as Ruby, but I'm going to enjoy the two leads, relationships, dynamics, performances. They're going to be fun guides through it. So I already know that, God, I don't want to think that, we're in for another write-off of a year of Doctor Who, because even though I have been very negative about Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death, and I'm still feeling the ripples of that, in that it made me not particularly enjoy Joy to the World or Robot Revolution, and I'm a little bit down on Doctor Who as a whole at the moment, I did enjoy more of the last season than I didn't, and more than I was expecting to. And I have to keep remembering that. So while, Robot Revolution wasn't the opener that I wanted, it wasn't the story I wanted at this particular moment in time, next week is a new episode. Next week's got Mr. Ring-a-Ding. Maybe that's going to be just as wonderful as you'd think it would be from the promise of the trailers. The reason I'm holding fire on that, and I'm not getting hyped up about it, is because I thought the same thing about the Devil's Court, and then that turned out to not be all that great. It's an interesting time for me as a Doctor Who fan, and I really hope, actually, that even by coming back to these and doing these videos again and talking about the episodes just after they've aired, I watched this episode, it dropped at 8 AM, I watched it at probably about 11, left it a couple of hours, and then I've done this video. So I hope even by doing this, I become more engaged again, and I can wash away the memories of Empire of Death. And Legend of Ruby Sunday, I didn't like that one either. It's not just like it was all good part one and then a bad part two. I thought that finale in both its parts was poor. And I don't really like to talk in hyperbole either, which makes talking about very favourites and very least favourites quite difficult, because it always will sound like an exaggeration if you say, that's my very favourite and that's the worst thing ever. While maybe that finale isn't the worst thing ever, it's not an exaggeration for me to say that as time has passed since season 1 last year, I probably would say that finale, that two-part finale, it probably, if it's not in my bottom 5 stories of all Doctor Who, it's close. So again, don't really like to be that negative, but sometimes you're forced to, aren't you? Sometimes if you don't like a story, then you can't pretend to. But yeah, those are my immediate thoughts on the Robot Revolution, and I do hope that the episodes to come sort of buoy me back up a bit. What do you think of the Robot Revolution? Was it a strong season opener? Was it your favourite season opener? Or, like me, did you find it like ever so slightly frustratingly just out of sync with what you would want from it. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for the continuation of the Doctor Who marathon. Android Invasion is the one that's next, and obviously I'll be here next week, and maybe actually the video next week might be before the Android Invasion, I don't know yet. But either way, I'll be back here next week to give my immediate thoughts on Lux. And again, apologies for being away for as long as I was. That was never the plan. The plan was never to stop. It was just when things started picking back up again, it was a case of like, oh, I need to find time to do it. Couldn't find time to do it. And then you fall into a routine where, you know, regrettably, this was never part of it. But I'm trying to get out of that habit and get back on the saddle. So if you enjoyed this and you weren't already and you're intrigued to see how I get on with the rest of the season, then do hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I will see you